All right. So we're
Right.
taking time today to talk about buying a home in today's market. So I'm Brian. I am a lender with Caliber Home Loans, and I have Mary with me
Hello. Um,
with Murphy Real Estate.
yep.
Yes. And so we're just going to go through a presentation, talk about today's market, talk about the home buying process, obviously from the lending side as well as from the agent side. And for first-time home buyers particularly, but also just for people who are maybe concerned about buying and selling in a market like this. So today we're just going to talk about what we do in our respective line of work, and then what it looks like to work with us and work with lenders and realtors in general, and then we'll kind of dig into today's market and the challenges that you're looking at and just some of the concerns overall with buying a home. And then we will talk about how we can help you with those concerns and just give you a brief overview of the process. So that is where we're going. Um, so yeah, as we both introduced ourselves, we're here locally. We work primarily with buyers and sellers of real estate. Um, myself as a lender, primarily on the buying side, but Mary would be well versed in all aspects of real estate. Um, so yeah, I Caliber Home Loans, just to kind of give a explanation of who we are as Caliber. We're a direct lender, so we fund our own loans, we service our loans, um, we're competitive with rates and fees. And it's a streamlined process. So we work with the same people um, day in and day out, as opposed to brokers who are shopping around with different lenders. So we really pride ourselves on our level of service and getting loans done on time. So Mary, if you want to just give yourself a little spotlight, talk about what you do.
Yeah, awesome. I love that, by the way. I am excited to go through you guys at some point with a buyer client. Yeah, so I work with Murphy Real Estate Group. My brother, Kevin Murphy, owns the company. We're based out of Gold Hill. It's technically in Rogue River, where we grew up. So pretty rooted here in the valley. We love it here. We've left and come back, but it's just home and it's a place we want to stay. And so real estate became a real awesome way to become very rooted here and include other people into that same space we love. We're a pretty small branch. Our principal broker is incredible. She was once the mayor of Rogue River, so she's an extremely awesome resource and amazing at her job. Been in real estate 15 years, and so we also pride ourselves in just like the connection with each other in the office, and at least I do. I love having the support and just working real personal with people we work with, and um, just having like treating it almost like how we would want to be treated and seeing what we want to see in that whole process of people living here in Southern Oregon. So I do work on both sides. I'm a listing agent and a buyer's agent. I'd like to focus on sustainable properties. That's sort of my favorite line of real estate. And I used to install solar. So offering some background with that and looking for those ideal rooftops for future systems is one of my favorite little quirks, I guess, when I show property. But that's, the overall goal is for to be stewards of this beautiful home. And also it's Earth Day. I just realized this was a great day to do this. So that's sort of the gist about me and Murphy Real Estate Group, I think. So yeah.
Owning a home, it's the American dream. I think that's where I always think of. Everybody wants to own a home, but why? What are the advantages to owning a home? Um, I can kind of talk about the financial aspects, but there are other aspects as well, right? So, um, Mary, what comes to your mind when you're thinking about owning a home?
Yeah, I really like this quote referencing the emotional security side of it. I mean, that's why a lot of people do want to own a home is to just feel secure, financially, but also just like for the sake of mental health, for like well-being. having freedom and flexibility of where you live and when you live there, not needing to be forced to move or have your payment change, with rental rate fluctuation. So yeah, it's just a really nice feeling to own a home. And I guess now you can chat about the financial side of it.
Well, I mean, a lot of people know that it's typically the largest asset that a family or a person owns. And with that, you have so an asset means it's of value. And so a home, I guess I'll take it from the standpoint of having a loan against it. So you buy a home with a loan, and so every month you are paying down that loan. So you're essentially building your wealth in your home. You're increasing the share that you own. And so it's kind of, a lot of people think about it as a forced savings account. So every month you're making that payment, which is increasing your equity in the home. And yeah, real estate is the cyclical industry, so values do tend to fluctuate, but over the long haul, there's a fixed amount of land, fixed amount of places that you can live. So it is something that appreciates over time. All right. Anything else you want to talk about why people should buy a house?
um, Gosh, I mean,
I know it's a big topic,
big topic. Why do you want to buy a house? You tell me, and I'll help you find the right one.
but well, that's a good point. So there are a lot of motivations, right? Um, and I think so today we're just really talking about people who are living in the home they're buying, but obviously investment real estate is a big slice of the pie for buyers out there.
Right, right.
Let's see, so what we do. So we've already established that you're the agent, I'm the lender, but maybe just talk about the different. So there's the buyers and sellers. So explain how you serve both.
Yeah, so I work with as a listing agent, sellers, and as a buyer's agent with buyers. And listing side of things, I, offer kind of the whole package. I've, been here in Oregon licensed for 2 years, but I was an assistant in Hawaii to a top producer and worked, a lot staging and helping sellers get ready to move, decluttering, kind of with the emotional side of everything as well. Just, you know, it's a big process to move out and like move on. I think when you're a first time home buyer, it's something that's easily forgotten is like the people in the home. But having that perspective I can offer to both sides is really helpful. And kind of offering extra services in that way. I used to be a photographer before I ever got into real estate. So I offer full photography services and recently got into flying drones, and I offer the full, especially helpful for rural property. So that's sort of one of my niche markets I'm working now. Um, and then with buyers, I work, with everyone. I mean, haven't done any commercial and don't think I'll be going that route anytime soon, but interested in eventually. I can help get into some as much as like a condo, duplex, or just, a small like one bed, one bath studio cottage. It really depends on what their needs are. And oh, and then of course raw land is something sorry, thought my dog was running away. Different dog. Um, yeah, so basically all sides of buying, all types of buyers, out of state, in state. Worked with them all, like single women, families like who live out of state, whose kids are shopping here for them. I've had that a few times, or vice versa. So yeah, just pretty flexible with that.
Um, so do you, and it obviously, I imagine it shifts from period to period, but do you find yourself typically working with more buyers or more sellers?
I think more buyers, honestly. Everybody wants the listings because they're more guaranteed. Buying can be a longer process, especially in a buyer's or in a seller's market. But I've, definitely enjoyed working with more buyers and Um, yeah, definitely more buyers. I think it's, again, I'm 2 years into this industry here, and it can take some time to generate enough like footing in the community as a realtor to get the listings. So, yeah.
I imagine it's a little bit more intimate working with buyers than sellers, more transactional maybe, they're
I actually kind of, I feel almost opposite. I mean,
really.
I think because with sellers, you're in their home and you're sometimes like especially with how I've staged, sometimes I'll be like, I'm going to change your home to make it better in my perspective to sell, or advise you in a way that you can do some things that maybe you don't really want to do. But like, there's a lot of emotional support involved with sellers, I believe. And
Hmm.
often, especially because they are then looking for their next home. So you get both. And I mean, definitely emotional for buyers. I would say it's hard to say who is having the worst time. But yeah, I think being in someone's home and like telling them what it's worth and all those things, that for me is hard. It's something I've really had to work on building confidence in, and that confidence just comes from experience, and working with buyers really strengthens that experience of knowing who's going to want their home at what price. So I value both, and I think it actually is important, I think, to work with an agent who does both, because
Hmm.
having that dual perspective is really important. Yeah.
Nice. Well, and I'll just throw in a little tidbit about what I do. So lender, I work with Caliber Home Loans. So there's a lot of lenders out there. Caliber is a top five in mortgage business. And we are a direct lender. So not a broker, but are certainly competitive with fees and pricing. A lot of people, it's comes down to what's the best rate. And I'd say it's always important to get that in writing. So um, we I think pride ourselves on our purchase business, making sure that we're closing on time and providing a high level of service. So that's what I'll just throw in there about what I do.
Then are you working mostly with buyers?
Yeah, something about it. I'm working with a lot of buyers. Um, all right, so the market, and we could spend hours talking about this, so I don't want to get bogged down,
About,
but
hey,
and everybody has an opinion, right?
yeah, who's got a bigger fan?
Um, so let's just talk about where people are at with concerns, I guess, wanting to jump in. Obviously sellers, they're they're thinking they're at the peak of the market, capitalizing on some gains in value, but are we in a bubble? What is your opinion?
Yeah, so that's definitely a fear that a lot of buyers have, and some have like pumped the brakes. And, you know, even before COVID, it was like, oh no, everything's going to crash. And then it did the opposite, right? So, um, judging on what really rules the market, which I learned in real estate school, is not necessarily the state of the world. It's supply and demand where you're at. And it can be different in Kansas, it can be different in California, in the city. And the pandemic affected that. And I think it kind of nudged people into a direction that has made Southern Oregon highly desirable.
Mm.
And also, we've always been more affordable than some of these other desirable places to live. Um, with that in mind, and with the current supply and demand based on other factors such as the fires we had and people losing their homes and the low interest rates. So, more buyers coming out prepared to buy and recognizing how important home life is now that we've all been stuck at home for almost a year now, to a degree. I think there's been a shift in mentality and following that, but also the long term concept of supply and demand will always be those last determining factors. And that all, like you mentioned before when we were talking, Bryan, like a lot of experts on in this industry are all thinking it's not going to end. Like prices are going to keep going up, especially in on the Pacific Northwest area. And I don't see anything saying otherwise. So I mean, there's definitely fear because things are changing fast, and with fast change, it's scary, especially when
Hmm.
it means local buyers are getting, there's a lot of pressure, like a lot of money, big price increases. But hopefully, if you're serious about it and you see it as that long term investment, it'll pay off and you'll get more than just um, that fear of like purchasing such a long, like huge thing, huge asset. You'll also feel more secure in what you own and what you're able to do with it long term.
And you know, it's I think cliche now, but you can find deals in any market.
Mhm.
Do you find that to be true?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I think it's like also being creative of what the trend is and where you're flexible with your needs. I know not everyone, we spoke about before, like identifying what you need and what you want, and being flexible between those two realms is helpful as far as like, hey, maybe I'm open to living in a two-story home while most of the market isn't, that's an area I see deals happen more often. Being flexible in that, and it can pay off in yard size. There's definitely, aside from the trend of the single level home and the value in that, there are some reasons to buy differently, and or like, you know considering a slightly different area and getting into your first home, maybe not in your dream location, but somewhere that will lock you in at an affordable rate where you feel comfortable, so yeah, flexibility will allow to find good deals.
Hmm. And I, as a lender in this conversation, demand is, well, and the high prices are more affordable now with the interest rates. So if you are financing your purchase, um,
Mm.
you can afford to buy more because the cost of finance is pretty cheap. So um, I think the one point I'd want to say, so if it's a seller's market, where do you see that timeline going? Like, how long is it going to be a seller's market?
Well, I think there's no clear end in sight,
Yeah.
again, like because of the supply and demand, um, until we have a huge migration, I guess, or a lot of new homes. But it's just hard with the Oregon being pretty strong on their urban growth boundary, protecting their farmland, protecting the rural community, like just the goal to build up instead of out. It's pretty neat here how much they do care about keeping that pretty locked. That being said, there are new developments going in, and people are actively building to meet the need, but the prices are still reflective of the market. Um, so that being said, I really don't know. I mean,
Mhm.
it's hard to say. I'm
Right.
not.
And I think it's a long horizon rather than next year. You'll see prices come back down. So,
And I would
yeah.
say, like, if I may, don't be waiting for that. Like,
Hmm.
I'm not waiting for that. It's like anyone who's ever been waiting for that, often gets disappointed. I mean, people often refer to 2008, like, oh, when the market crashed, and comparing it to this, but I just don't think they're comparable because it's more of a supply demand sort of situation. So,
Right.
mhm.
Right. Okay, the process. So, we just established that it can be a little stressful. There's a lot of big decisions being made. Um, yeah, and I'm kind of forgetting what we talked about earlier. So where do you want to start talking about the process?
Well, I think I mean, I don't know if you want to go to the next slide, but
Mm.
basically the steps of, just identifying what you're looking for. Um, where do you want to live? How far do you want to commute? Do you have kids who need to go to school? Do you have preferences on those schools? Um, how long you want to live there? Is it a 5-year home while you save for the dream home. Like in that case, buy smaller, like, Um, so yeah, knowing what to look for, and that I guess would lead us into like starting to work with a lender, identifying he'll be the person to help you identify your financial um, like ability, I guess, finance ability, and then once it comes time to actually purchase, I can help identify what you should be offering on that specific home. So, do you want to share any about this specific part of the process?
um, yeah, so I think one of the questions a lot of people come to me with is, what's the maximum that I can afford, that I can offer, or that I can purchase? And that's an important number to know, but it's also, I think, more important to know where your comfort level is. So, how much of a down payment, how much of your bank account are you willing to transfer from your bank account into your home? And then, how much are you willing to pay on a monthly basis? Because it can be, as long as you're thinking about the long term, I think it's important to have those have that payment be in line with what you're comfortable with, rather than the maximum that you can afford, because the loan programs can be pretty aggressive and allow you to really spend more than you may be able to in the long run. So that's kind of my 2 cents, and I think that was, financial stress. If you're buying a home and it leads to financial stress, then that's a bad thing. That's not what we want. So we want it to be a good decision, want it to feel like you are increasing your wealth, that you are comfortable, you're happy in your home. So having, just an in-depth conversation, up front and early on in the process is important.
Yeah.
And there are lots of loan programs, so I won't take the time to go over those now, but yeah, a lot of people, even if you have bad credit or um, not as much for a down payment, we can help you find ways to get into a home.
Yeah, I've always been surprised the more I've worked with lenders, just how creative you can be in that way, like upfront and buying down a loan, things like that. And it's really cool that there's options. And I wanted to add something about, we discussed like the fear of buying at top of like your purchase price. There are some areas where I would say it's like okay to do. It depends on some people really like that's their number one value in life is their home. Okay, cool. Like, great. Do you, spend your money there. Um, but then there's also like some creative ways to approach like maybe offsetting your mortgage, having an extra unit. Like here it's pretty common to find places with a mother-in-law unit, especially in Ashland, Jacksonville, these places that will often offer Airbnb. I don't think Ashland does that, but here, if you're in a historic home, there's some flexibility there, where you can have like a renter help offset that. So just something to throw out there to let people know there are creative ways to help you buy at the top of your range while not necessarily spending at the top of your range on your monthly payment.
Yeah, that's a great point. I've heard of people, starting their real estate investment journey by buying a home and then they rent out all the rooms, right?
Roommates.
Yeah, as long as you can tolerate that from a lifestyle, then
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So where do you begin? So I'm a single, or I have a family, and we're looking to buy. Um, where do you start? So a lot of people, they're scrolling around on Zillow looking at homes, but when's it a good time to talk to somebody in the business and kind of narrow down?
Yeah. So Zillow is definitely a source. People will find an agent, and often it happens kind of accidentally. I don't think buyers really know when they usually decide it based on the home, but they don't realize that it's a randomized system for Zillow. We as agents pay to have that service to connect us to buyers. I've made great connections that way. It's not a bad way to go. But if you're already working with an agent, just contact them when you see a house you like. You can directly search for agents on Zillow. You just, type in agent finder. I think there's a specific button for it. and you can go to different towns and cities and read about the agents, look at their profiles, read their reviews. They're it's definitely a great way to go if you don't have other connections to connect you to a realtor. Asking your network of friends, who they've worked with recently, who they'd recommend. That's also an awesome way to get connected. And then the lender, I mean, I'm not, most of the time I connect people to a lender, but it has often happened where they go to a bank they like and they've made friends with the banker who is also a lender there, or they just knew somebody who was a lender as a friend. What is like the most common way for you, Bryan, that people will contact you, like the source?
Yeah, I think most typically people are looking for homes before they know what they can afford. So yeah, we're getting people once they've talked to a realtor, um, and they want to make an offer, so they want to know what they can afford. And I think that's here in our presentation. Step one is getting pre-approved, but it can really happen in any order. Um, so yeah, I think it is important to know your price range, certainly, and then know what's out there, because it can be deceiving. It can be kind of a lengthy process to talk to lenders, get quotes, and be able to analyze offer A to offer B. So if you have time, I think it's worth your while to shop around, talk to different people, just like it is with a realtor. You want to find somebody who's responsive, who cares about your interests, who's willing to listen. And so yeah, those conversations take time.
Yeah.
um, so the sooner the better, I guess, is kind of the point here. And let's see, how do you know I'm getting a good deal? So it's kind of different on my side than it is from yours. So if people out there looking at homes and the offers are going above list price, what conversations are you having with people?
Right, right. So it's a little bit relative, to the person and to what their wants are. Again, like really getting strong on what matters to you. You're gonna feel like you get a good deal just by getting it sometimes, It doesn't even matter I mean, if you're lucky and you can have that experience, it's pretty awesome. But, I think the way I can help make it more transparent of like, yes, we're getting a good deal based on today's market at least, is by doing a comparable market analysis of that neighborhood. And it's totally specific per place. Also, just learning like what to look for, like red flags in homes, making sure the bones look good. I look for cracks around, I'll walk the house, look at the ceilings, check the hardware, check the materials. Are we looking at laminate and carpet? Are we looking at hardwood floors, or like, updated windows? Your agent will have developed an eye of like, yes, this is priced accurately and it's a good deal. You're not going to pour $30,000 later just to do some basic upgrades that should be in here based on this price range and square footage or location or whatever. And that's why it's so hard to know just looking at a house without location and all those other things in mind to know whether it's a good deal based on square footage. Often people say, like, oh, the Zestimate is telling me it's only worth this. And I'm like, well, Zillow can't walk into your home and see if you just replaced your cabinets and like bathrooms. It's really helpful to just learn, have that conversation about each home with your agent, sort of trust them a little bit. Sometimes I'll get some pushback and it's understandable. It's confusing, but there's a lot that goes into pricing a home and a lot that goes into the way you value it specifically. And I'll just be a resource if you work with me, or your other agent will just be a resource to tell you why the majority would see that as a good buy. So hopefully that answered the question. I know it's hard to just give a straight answer to how do you know you got a good deal, but you'll be able to know and feel it once it happens, I think.
I think it's interesting that people will spend hours and hours researching a vacuum cleaner, and then they'll go make an offer on a house within an hour. It's
Yeah.
such an emotional decision,
Mhm.
and then, you're obviously pulled into the investment aspect of it. It's your largest asset for a lot of people. So, but it's also a place you live. I think there's just these competing factors involved. And so, um, yeah, would you recommend people look at multiple properties? I mean, is that part of your process? Or, if people are really dialed into what they want, you can find that right away.
Even if we often like to answer that, even when I work with a buyer and it's the first time we've seen a house, usually they've shopped on Zillow before, so they've got it, and that's what it's such an incredible tool having Zillow. Like if you look at it and you're like, like don't go see it, like, or maybe
Hmm.
your agent will be like, no, we really should go see it because it like the pictures suck, or we'll just give it a chance. But in general, um, I would say just shopping around a little bit is very helpful. I mean, I would want to do it as a buyer, just get a feel for what I want. A lot of people think they know what they want, but then when they start shopping, not maybe it re-solidifies what they want to where they're ready to go and make sure they get it and value it more and understand usually what they want is what everybody wants, so now they know why they're competing so hard for that house instead of the one down the street that's not turnkey and not doesn't have the yard they want. It's I think it's really helpful to shop around a little bit.
Hmm.
It's hard because timing's everything right now, so the more you can do on Zillow shopping around, the better. It saves everybody time. It's hard even to get into appointments right now, so developing an eye for that. And yeah, I mean, if you can drive neighborhoods in the afternoons to sort of see if you like it before you go into like trying to get in, or maybe you didn't get in. There's a lot of ways where you can shop around without actually going to the home, and that will be highly appreciated from your agent and the seller's agents too. As much as I like to encourage people to see all the ones they want, some people want to see ones that are 100,000 more than they can afford just to compare. But that's really what Zillow is for. It's
Yeah.
you don't need to go there. But does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does for me. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Let's see. So, what can we do for you? Um, well, why don't you start, Mary? When people are, here in this process and they want to start looking at homes, what what are kind of the first steps that you're walking them through?
So
Um,
yeah, first steps. Well, here we go. Here's some steps. First step, I would say, working with a buyer is, telling them to get pre-approved if they haven't been. Like, do you have a lender? And then connecting them with either you or, you know, I've got a few lenders I work with, and based on the way they connect to each of those people, like choose one they like to talk to and they like, find the good quotes with and decide they want to go forward with. But getting that done first is really important. And all I'm doing is giving them a few business cards, to start off. And then I'll just, I try to really get to know the person. Just spend a lot of time listening at first, like, and asking a lot of questions. Trying on ideas while I'm in houses with them. Like, what if this room was bigger? Or what if, have you considered how much the yard really matters? Like, imagine if it was cut in half. Like, so that way, if we see something they might like later, I can identify, like, oh, we've talked about that actually. Like just trying to get into someone's like head is sort of, I guess, is something I can help with, like just putting myself in that position. I find that it's, you know, really helpful to just tell people in advance what to expect with the process. Like, aside from just putting in an offer, because most people don't really know, like, okay, then what? And maybe that leads into our next question. But for you, what's your initial step with people? Like, just, I know there's a lot of paperwork involved, Ryan.
yeah, and I think a lot of people think getting pre-approved is what they do on the internet. They put in how much they make and how much they have for a down payment, and then click a button and boom, I'm pre-approved. So it is a little bit of a conversation convincing people to provide paperwork. That's really, we have to verify what you say in order to give the pre-approval. We're pre-underwriting. We're taking into account all the rules that we have to work with, and with as little documentation as possible, saying everything looks good here. So yeah, from the documentation side, we're collecting bank statements to verify down payment sources, um, your income statements. So for self-employed people, it's a little bit more of a process, gathering tax returns and that sort of thing. But if you're an employee, you can just work with pay stubs and W-2s. But yeah, the more work you can get done up front, I think the easier the process is down the road. So um,
Yeah, and
yeah,
when you get it done with one lender to get that second quote or multiple quotes, at least you've got it already, you know.
totally.
You're very
Yeah,
organized in your life after that. You've got all your financial paperwork in order, you know where you stand. It's a good thing to do.
yeah, and it's tax time, right? Like people should be, those statements should be handy. All right, so all the ducks are in a row. They're ready to make an offer. Um, yeah, why don't you talk about just how that works?
Right, right. Yeah, so making an offer is definitely um, very specific to the house again, but I would say, you know, you gosh, I'm trying to think which approach with this. Like there's like the actual act of making an offer, and then there's just all the things to consider when making an offer. Things to consider is just like going in knowing what your max is on that property, like how much it means to you, just feeling really solid on how big you want to go to make it happen, especially in this market, because usually if it's a home that you feel very passionate about, other people are feeling similar. Um, that's just sort of what I'm seeing. The ones that people are like, it's just usually we're not competing as much, you know, or maybe we are, but not as intensely. So identifying all of those aspects with your agent, like getting that CMA, we talked about the certified and our market analysis, and then coming up with really strong terms. And again, talking with your agent how strong you want to go on that house and what those things mean to you. But things like committing to over appraisal right now has become really popular. Escalation clauses are starting to be more and more common. Not always the best thing to do. And you can talk about risk reward on both sides on every term, right? And then maybe there's some terms you want to go really big on, and that'll help offset not going as big on different terms. So you can be really flexible in offers. There's no one size fits all, and it's actually really fun. You know, it's kind of a fun game. As stressful as it is, it can be fun. And then the third party services, like once your offer is in and you've got acceptance, which is like the big one moment. Like for me, it always feels like step one. Everything else is just, you know, getting ready. um, then your agent will connect you to the inspection, like whoever is needed for that. There's different inspections based on different properties. Whether it's rural, you'll have more different types of inspections, well, septic, um, anything else you need for that property. And then you've got just your basic urban home inspection. And then if the home is older, you might want to do some more invasive testing, is what it's called, like for asbestos or lead-based paint, stuff like that. Um, and then let's see, basically, aside from that, you've got the escrow company, which your agent will call and get them your information to start setting up the steps for that, which is they're just a third party that manages the title transfer and the transfer of funds. And they're just, you know, a non-emotional third party under.
The only one not emotional in the process. um, so negotiating, I mean, that's definitely probably more in your world than it is in mine. So what about the repair addendum? What about after you've got your offer accepted, you're doing your inspections? I know this probably isn't as applicable today, but in a normal market, um, there's another round of negotiations going on, right?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I just wrote one up yesterday. That's actually something I started to pride myself in is like honing that skill, like really taking the inspection report, which can be like a 50 plus page report of what, on any house, not just nice homes, because the inspections they go thorough. You usually end up with a nice long list of things you can work on for the next 5 years. It's like if you're doing it right. And usually there's small things. If there's big red flag items, then yes, we need to recognize that any buyer will run into the same problem. And even though it's a seller's market, like we need to address this, or at least you need to be aware of it and really ready to take that on. But usually, right now, sellers are not into doing repairs. It's more of like a price reduction element. Sometimes you can get them to cover some of your closing costs. that's that shouldn't really matter to them, but because appraisals are like appraisal value is kind of a, an issue with purchase price value, it can create a dilemma. And I've actually just yesterday was working on some wording around that, like trying to have both, but like preventatively planning to need to sacrifice some closing costs for to cover the difference of appraisal to loan. I don't know if this is making sense, but basically, repairs, I still think they're important to make the sellers aware of and to just ask. You can't be penalized for asking. They can say no and you can walk away, and or they can say no and you can keep going. Like you're not locked in based on just trying to negotiate. So
Hmm.
no real risk, I don't think.
Hmm. Um, yeah, and then I think, well, I did maybe want to bring up one idea is that I've heard that, cash offers are getting accepted, but they're also terminating more often than not because, they get in and then see the house and feel like they get to throw their weight around as cash buyers. So, do you see cash? How do you think people can compete with cash buyers if they're financing?
So I think so the reason cash buyers are attractive is because you don't need to get an appraisal. So if you can proactively um, basically state how much you're willing to go over appraisal, and they're like, okay, that should suffice because they felt confident in the way they priced the home, and also have like a large down payment to make them like see that you can afford, if that were to happen, to come up with that cash difference. um, then you've got a chance of competing with cash. We have definitely been in a position I have with a buyer where we beat a cash offer, and it was being proactive in those ways, and also um, you know, just talking with the agent and making them aware of the risks. Like I've told sellers agents before, like I understand you might be getting, if you get a cash offer, that might be attractive, but these are very solid buyers. They're very serious. They want this house, and it's not just like an easy thing for them. They're going to be committed. They're paying for um, a, an appraisal. An appraisal is an expensive thing. So you don't want to have to do that too many times. A buyer can just walk away and forfeit their earnest money. And like, I mean, not to say all cash buyers just have tons of cash, whatever. It's really nice to have cash, but at the end of the day, it does make you less. In my opinion, I wouldn't advise a cash buyer just for the sake of it over a conventional buyer. You know, I think if they waive inspections, maybe, but if they're still needing inspections and stuff, like you're gonna want to give an equal chance to a conventional buyer, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, really nowadays, like you said, when that offer is accepted, that's the celebration point. So, hopefully things are all downhill from there. The loan obviously goes into action once we have a accepted offer. We're submitting for approval. We're ordering, the appraisal, um, and yeah, hopefully there's no surprises there. Um, and it really is dependent on how well we did gathering documents ahead of time.
Mhm.
So, and then that's it, right? So it's four easy steps. Um, so the timeline, that
Mhm.
every situation is different, every buyer, seller is different, but um, what's typical for you? If there was an average timeline, maybe just
Mhm.
keeping in mind your last few transactions, how long did those take from the first conversation to the end?
Okay, from first conversation to the end, they're very wide range, up
Hmm.
to a year, and I have no problem with that, that's fine. But as soon as you're like in contract, I would say now we're talking month and a half to 2 months. I think it's important to understand that getting started at the beginning, things are going to take a bit to where you gain that momentum to when you're like now you're actually buying instead of preparing to buy, all the other steps we mentioned. But yeah, I think right now the typical closing time is 45 days, and that's like the quickest. I've tried for 30 days. So if you're doing cash and you don't have an appraisal or inspections, then yes, you can do a month or less. And that's one reason cash buyers can be very attractive if someone's really committed to a timeline and they need out as soon as possible.
Hmm.
Um, but if you're not committed to too much of a timeline, like 2 months, and then you're done. Like, so long as the loan and everything else goes smoothly and you don't hit any major roadblocks, like sometimes an appraiser will need to reappraise for some reason. So yeah, but there's a lot of ways to prevent those sort of hiccups. But yeah.
Yeah, and I guess you're dealing with multiple timelines. What about that? Again, the realtor is often at the middle of the storm, so you're dealing with all the questions, all the demands. We just kind of get to be on the outside looking in for a lot of the process. But yeah, you've got somebody moving in, somebody moving out, and yeah, where it's hard to get into a home. What are some flexible ways of dealing with that?
Oh yes, yeah, we had talked about this before. Like I've always advocated to be a little flexible, like to just prepare yourself to need to be a little flexible. Like for example, this last week we had a double contingency deal, like essentially my buyer buying a place and that seller buying a place and that seller buying a place. So it was just this domino effect and everybody needed funding, like lender funding. Um, the way you can set up occupy after closes, they can be a little flexible. So allowing everybody a week and then like shortening the timeline once you're in that occupancy after close period, I think is the most ideal way to go instead of everyone getting like really high pressure at the end. And you end up dealing with personalities sometimes, and that's okay. It happens, but I've always just found it better to, as agents, try to prepare people for not everything to go perfectly. And especially if you're working with like a shorter closing time. If you're in a 60-day closing time, maybe you close early and then everything goes smoothly, or you can really have an exact date. But being more flexible with a longer closing will help you reach those goals. But we've mentioned leases before. Like I have buyers right now who really had to think like, are we going to extend our lease or are we going to find a place, and the closer we got to that, they're pretty smart. They just decided to extend their lease and deal with that later, which I think for them was a smart move because there's no guarantee that you're going to find a house and close and have somewhere to live. So with rental, like keeping in mind the rental market and like other options you have, and how important it is in that way of somewhere to actually physically live, that definitely matters in that approach. But it's so different depending on each transaction. And yeah, being flexible where you can be. Like my buyer, he ended up needing to be the most flexible of everybody because he had nothing else. But it was a little bit of a hard pill to swallow, because other people have their own goals, and
Hmm.
it's yeah, it's a little much, but it's I like scheduling. I've always been a big coordinator for like I love throwing events and like for me it's not too stressful, but I can help mitigate that a little bit where I can. You know.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. I think for me, it's super valuable to talk to someone like yourself who is talking to people who are in these situations and knowing how we can get on the same page, and work with similar interests in mind. I like to think of it as a team, team approach. Like we're all on the same team working together. So um, yeah, I think just hearing from you is really helpful for me. Hopefully, it's been helpful for other people. So
Well,
here's some contact information, and I know we also have an event coming up. So
right.
if you've lasted this long, I'll let you close it out.
Yeah.
We're gonna do a little mixer
Yeah.
next month.
So Brian and I decided to throw an event like in person, like it'll be outdoors, and we've got a place lined up in Talent. It's a new business. I'll be posting about it. It'll be a brewery, and we're gonna do it on the 13th of next month. So it's Thursday, the 13th of May, right at the end of the whole tax like cutoff deadline. Oh, sorry, my husband's getting home. But yes, basically, we'll be releasing more information on that in an upcoming post and hopefully get some people interested to come share a live conversation about lending and buying in the Rogue Valley.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's it.